Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your interest in this topic. My name is Jeannie Love. I'm a neurodiversity consultant and coach with over 20 years of experience teaching and coaching individuals with ADHD and autism. Through my business Beyond Coaching, I partner with organizations to unlock the strengths of their neurodivergent employees. My goal is to help you understand and apply practical strategies for supporting cognitive diversity in your organization. This is Neurodiversity Insights in 20, and it's designed to give you impactful and manageable information in a brief amount of time. And as always, here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out, bring me any challenges, case studies, or specific sessions that I can, Please feel free to reach out, bring any challenges, case studies, or specific questions that I can design a session around. Our topic for today is we can't wait for a diagnosis to be neuro-inclusive. As always, my goals for you are to 1, see what you've been missing, recognize the hidden challenges holding back some of the people on your team, their performance, their engagement, and ultimately their retention. And 2, that you'll walk away with practical wins, high impact strategies you can apply immediately that require no major overhauls, no extra budget, just simple, smart, small adjustments. So let's start here with a bit of context. You may have heard me say in the past that about 1 in 5 people is neurodivergent. This is a pretty well-respected statistic. That includes neurotypes such as ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and perhaps hundreds more. And here's the thing that's important for the session. Most people will never have a formal diagnosis. There's a variety of reasons for that, which I'll dive into in a bit, but right now you might consider that they might not be able to afford an evaluation, or perhaps there's a long waiting list for the evaluation. Perhaps they're scared of the stigma associated with the label. There's a lot of conversations, misinformation, political and social anxiety about and stigma around some of these diagnoses. And often, the individual doesn't even know that what they're experiencing has a name. So they're not even seeking a diagnosis. This is why many of my clients come to me in their 50s, their 60s, and even their 70s, because they're just now being exposed to the information that what's been going on with them their entire lives actually has a diagnostic label. But even without a diagnosis, these employees are still on your team, and you may still have a legal responsibility to support them. So I'm going to touch briefly on the Americans with Disabilities Act. I want to preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer. I never have been. I'm a teacher. So this is not legal advice. What I've done here is consolidated a bit of information to kind of get you thinking. But if you want more specifics, more details to understand the policy, I really recommend that you connect with your HR team or your legal team to dive into the specifics. But it's important for all of us to understand how the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, frames our responsibility as employers and team leaders. The ADA requires accommodations when there's a known or perceived disability or a record of one. Here's the important nuance. A formal diagnosis is not always required. That said, the obligation to provide accommodations usually starts when either the employee asks for support or when the need for support is obvious. Just noticing someone struggling doesn't automatically require you to provide accommodations, but it is your cue to lean in, get curious, and start the conversation with them. The ADA uses a 3-part test to determine need for support. 1, the person has an impairment that limits major life activities. Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you about one that maybe you haven't considered before. 2, they have a history of such an impairment. 3, or they are regarded as having one even if they don't actually have it. So it's the regarded as piece that's especially important. If an employer treats someone as though they have a disability based on the behavior they're observed or assumptions, that person may be protected, unless the issue is considered both minor and short-term. I'm going to tell you a story that I heard. There was this frontline supervisor who had a team of people, of course, that was working for him. And whatever the project was that they were navigating or the problem that they were trying to solve as a team, there was one person that just wasn't working for. Whatever the dynamics or the problem-solving skills needed, it just wasn't working for this one person, and it was causing some stress for the team, for the individual, and for the supervisor. So the supervisor took notice of this, came up with a creative solution, assigned that person to another job, gave them a very specific, concrete task to do. They knew exactly what was expected of them. It harnessed their skills, and they were able to do it independently. It worked well for everyone. Now, I don't know if anybody on the team, the supervisor, or even the individual knows this, but that specific strategy works well for people who are autistic. So again, I don't know if the supervisor knows this. I don't know if the individual knows this. But what the supervisor did was leaned in to what was going on, the challenges that he was observing, tried something new that worked well. So I look at this as saying, okay, without having any sort of formal diagnosis, the supervisor saw an issue, leaned in, created a solution that worked well. I think that's great, and I think it sort of meets the expectations of this. So the bottom line, you don't have to diagnose your employees. That's not our job, but you do need to notice. And when you notice a struggle, the best thing you can do is engage. Ask questions, explore creative solutions. That's the heart of neuro-inclusion. So why don't people just get a diagnosis? Because for a lot of reasons, it can be very hard. Here are a few of them. First, as I mentioned previously, they might not even recognize their challenges belong to a specific neurotype, so they aren't even seeking a diagnosis. If they are, there's a shortage of providers who are educated to give those evaluations to adults specifically. If you do find someone, waiting lists can be long and the evaluations can be expensive. A lot of providers won't accept insurance, but even if they do, I heard that insurance might not even cover it. They might look at the individual and say, well, you've made it this far in life. Why do you need this evaluation and this diagnosis now? And so they decline to cover it. There's a lot of stigma, as I mentioned previously, around some of these diagnoses. And so along with that comes fear of disclosure. So even if they do have a diagnosis, they might not tell you. In fact, I even spoke with a nurse at a large public facility who was telling me that when some of the patients come in and they ask for a referral for an evaluation, they actually sit them down and have a real conversation, because the individual thinks that then they might be able to go to their employer and say, okay, I have this diagnosis, I need these accommodations, and what they get in return is discrimination. And so there's that fear of even seeking the diagnosis, talking about this with anyone, and bringing it to you. And finally, we have a lot of individuals who have been misdiagnosed, because we're learning so much more about some of these neurotypes that in the past, they have received other diagnoses, treatments, medications, that haven't worked. And so even if they come to us and they say, I have this diagnosis, that might not even be the right one. So for all these reasons, many of the folks you work with every day will never walk in with official paperwork. And that doesn't mean that they're not struggling. And it definitely doesn't mean they don't need or deserve support. So here's what this means for employers. Here's the big shift I'd like for you to consider. We won't always know who needs what kind of support. We can't wait for a label to trigger that need for support. Providing support shouldn't be dependent on a diagnosis. For example, if someone is missing deadlines, or withdrawing from the team, or overwhelmed by changes, it might not necessarily be a performance issue. It could be due to the way that their brain works. So that's your cue to lean in. Behavior that you observe is information. Notice it. Get curious. Curiosity over frustration. Start asking yourself and them how the environment could change to better support them. That means creating systems and environments that work for everyone, whether they're neurodivergent, whether they're burned out, going through a challenging time in life, or just having a rough day. This philosophy works for all of those. One of the best ways to respond without making anyone prove they qualify is through universal design. This is what our frontline supervisor did. Behavior gave him a clue that something needed to change, and so he took action. Whatever you do to support one ultimately ends up supporting many more. When I give presentations to groups of people, inevitably someone comes up to me at the end and says, I think maybe I must be neurodivergent because a lot of these strategies would work really well for me. And that may be the case. Perhaps they are, perhaps they aren't. But the reality is when we make small changes to support one person, there's actually a lot more of us who benefit from those. So when we make adjustments that are proactive, inclusive, and easy to access, we reduce the need for formal accommodation altogether. Here are some things for you to try right now after our session. Number one, make it easy to ask for help without judgment. Notice what people are coming to you with. What are their challenges? Lean into their experience and ask questions to truly understand what's going on. They might be experiencing something in a way that you really can't comprehend. I was having a conversation with a business mentor the other day, and he said something along the lines of, well, aren't we all just a little bit of ADHD? And I thought, see, that's it. That's it right there. We don't actually, or you don't actually understand what ADHD is and how significantly it can impact someone every day, throughout their day. They might be experiencing something in a way that you really can't comprehend. I spoke with a parent recently who has an adult child just leaving university who has such significant dyslexia. It impacts them in such a significant and profound way that they are unable to drive in unfamiliar places because they are not able to rapidly read the roadsides. So just imagine that, especially if you're in the US, the freedom to get into your car and just go is something that so many of us really take for granted. This person does not have that freedom. This is impacting them in such a significant way that it's really hard for us to comprehend. Number two, when someone's behavior seems unusual, pause before correcting. Ask why. Listen. Don't just ask them to do better, because perhaps they're doing their very best. Make changes based on what they tell you and about their experience. Don't just ask them to cope better. Remember that the behavior that we're observing is information for us to use. And three, get curious and resourceful. Rewatch the sessions that I have here on YouTube, perhaps the one on spiky profiles, to understand different brain patterns. Google, research some strategies based on what someone is struggling with, or of course, you can always reach out to me and ask for help. Get good at incorporating these because they benefit lots of other people. So the big idea here, you don't need to diagnose. That is not our job. You just need to notice. That gives us information that we can use to respond, just as our frontline supervisor did. You don't need a complete overhaul to make a difference. So if you need help supporting someone on your team, if something in this session made you think of a specific person or a challenging you're experiencing, here's my contact information. Please reach out. We can walk through it together. And so thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your interest in this topic and your attention. I hope you have a great day. Take care.